Hey guys, thanks for joining. We're going to be going over a Florida administrative code. We're going to be going over a really long code, Chapter 64 B2-16. And this is the part that regulates chiropractors in the Florida Administrative Code. And I'm going to read you, I got these papers in front of me because I'm going to read to you all of the crazy stuff that these guys don't want you to do. Rules they thought up of to punish you so that you're aware about the rules and you don't do them. And half of these things I would have never thought were a violation. I'm sure you feel the same way, but they are. So I'm going to go through. We're going to upload this actual administrative code to the platform so that you guys have the access to read everything. And just so you know, I'll just show it to you, but there's the title of the offense, which is a Florida statute on this side. And then there's a first offense, second offense, third or more offenses. So I'm just going to go through the first offense for each one. Keep in mind that a second offense, if you do, for instance, this first one here, failure to provide itemized patient billing. Let's say you went an entire year without giving any patients itemized bills and they all complained. Each one of those is a first, second, and subsequent, even if they all wait to complain at the same time. So keep in mind that if you're doing one thing, you're probably doing it often. And it does kind of go by complaints. But at the same time, you may be, if one of the complaints in here is, false or misleading advertising, and you've been using the same ad for a year and 12 people complain about it, each one is a subsequent offense, okay? So keep in mind, you may get hit just with the first offense, or you may get hit with multiple at the same time, okay? So I'm just going to go through a bunch of the things and offenses, and then I'll tell you what the punishment is for the first offense only. You can see the full chart on the platform, okay? So first thing, failure to provide patient an itemized patient billing. To give them an itemized bill, that's a violation. A fine of $1,000, 6 months probation with records monitoring, and 3 hours of continuing ed on laws, rules, and ethics. So this is a guideline. Also, I want to mention a guideline doesn't necessarily mean you'll get this. You could get this. You could get less. It's a guideline. You could get more, okay? Depending on the severity and if there's any mitigating factors. Things like, hey, I didn't give the patient the bill because my biller was out on maternity leave for 6 months and I had an excuse and the board grants pity upon you. You may get more or less, but this is the guideline for what the board wants you to get, okay? So that's one. Practicing without an active license. So let's say your license is suspended or has some type of restrictions on it. And so if you're practicing without an active license, from a minimum of an administrative fine of $500 for each month of practice without an active license, up to a maximum of permanent revocation of your license, depending on what the severity was, why you were practicing without an active license. Maybe you didn't know. Maybe you knew about it and intentionally hid yourself from practice. So another one here, knowing concealment of information about a violation. So if they get you for a violation and the board's investigating and you conceal a bunch of things, you run in the office, shred all your medical records and say, I don't have anything to give you. That right there would be a minimum of $500 fine, 6 months probation, up to a maximum of a $1,000 fine, 1 year probation, and 3 hours CE on laws, rules, and ethics. Another one here, having a license in another state, territory, or country that the local board takes action upon you. So let's say you're one of these New Yorkers who moved to Florida because of the pandemic, or one of these Californian people who come here, and you have an issue with your license in that original state, and then you come here. Okay, the board finds out about it here. That is a $500 fine. If the action in the other state involved sexual misconduct, then a permanent restriction on your license requiring a chaperone will be present. So that's if you have in another state, territory, or country. Crime related to practice. If you have a misdemeanor or you have a felony. If you have a misdemeanor, you get a minimum $1,500 fine, 6 months probation, up to $3,000 fine, and a 1 year suspension. And then if it's a felony, you could have a minimum fine of $5,000 and a 1 year probation. And then it just goes up higher depending on that. But false misleading advertising. A lot of chiropractors do this. You guys have a false misleading advertising Who determines if what's false, what's misleading? The board. They determine it based on the rules they have. Their rules are a little bit vague. Some are very specific, and some are a little bit subjective. They get to decide, okay? And so that is a minimum $1,000 fine and a letter of concern, up to a maximum $2,500 fine and 3 hours of laws, rules, and ethics. Using a phony name. I had no idea that that was a statute. That's Florida statute 460.413, and it's in that long list of violations. That would be 2 hours of continuing education. Failure to report on another doctor who committed a violation of these acts. That could be up to 3 hours of rules and laws and a $500 fine. Then they have here malpractice. So they distinguish between gross malpractice and repeated malpractice. Those are legal terms. But gross malpractice, minimum $2,500 fine up to $5,000 and a permanent revocation is a guideline. Doesn't mean you'll get permanently revocation, but it could be. And then repeated malpractice from a minimum of $1,000 fine, 3 hours continuing ed, 1 year suspension, 1 year probation, they also may have you take further exams. Another one, soliciting patients or commercial solicitation from an accident report system. So getting police reports illegally or paying someone to either get in an accident or come treat at your clinic after a legitimate accident. That's a minimum $3,000 fine, 2 year probation, up to a maximum $6,000 fine, 2 year suspension. And they also want you to do continuing ed. Medical record keeping. This happens to a lot of doctors. You guys have some of the worst medical records in the medical profession. I've seen them thousands of times on personal injury cases. Chiropractic records need a lot of work. Part of this platform is going to give you guys forms so that you have better medical record keeping. The biggest thing that I see as far as medical record keeping deficiencies is chiropractors are not mentioning why they take x-rays or the results of the x-rays when they do them in their office. MRIs, you're not documenting why you refer a patient for an MRI. You're not saying I went over the MRI results with the client, with the patient, and you're just putting the report in the file. That's not sufficient, okay? And medical record keeping. In addition to 3 hours of continuing education on laws, rules, and ethics, they want another 6 hours of documentation and coding, a minimum $1,000 fine, and 1 year probation with records monitoring. So that's a standard guideline. Another one here, practicing beyond the scope or competency. That's an additional 3 hours of laws, rules, and ethics, and a minimum of $1,000 fine. I would have never thought this was a rule, but it is. It's a Florida statute. Experimenting on human subjects without consent. I don't know. I don't even want to get into the punishment for that. It's weird. You can see it on the chart. Practicing beyond the scope permitted. So one of those was practicing beyond the scope of competency. Okay, or competency. This one's practicing beyond the scope permitted or competent to perform. I guess is a little bit different. And then we also have violating any lawfully issued order or subpoena. I get phone calls all the time from doctors. Abe, I got this subpoena. I'm going to throw it out. What do you think? I'm like, Doc, you need to comply. Why? If you don't comply with a lawfully issued order or subpoena and someone complains to the board about it, you could have a minimum of $1,000 fine and a letter of concern and 3 hours of following up on continuing education. Another one, submitting claims for treatment not provided. This is also known as like ghost billing or phantom billing, where you're billing for services that were never rendered. That's a minimum $3,000 fine, 2 years probation, 3 hours of rules and laws, 6 hours of documentation, and up to 1 year of probation with records monitoring. So this is another one that a lot of doctors don't comply with, but they don't get in trouble with, thank God, is nobody knows about the rules. So I want you to be educated about this rule in particular. Commingling or conversion of patient funds and financial record keeping. So some of you have taken money from clients for packages that 12 packages for X amount of dollars, 12 visits for X amount of dollars, come see me for 30 visits for X amount of dollars, right? And you're not following the rules for that. There's rules for that. And if you don't follow them, the violation could be 3 hours of laws and rules continuing education, minimum $2,000 fine, and a 1-year probation. Another one, failure to provide an insured with a copy of the claim. So for instance, let's say a patient comes in and says, hey, I want a copy of my bill, my claim form that you sent to an insurance company. If you sent a claim form to the insurance company, they're entitled to it. I had no idea that was even a rule. That's a $1,000 fine. Advertising a fee different from that is submitted to insurance companies. Okay. Advertising a fee different from that submitted to insurance companies. That's a $2,000 fine minimum, 1-year probation with monitoring, up to a maximum $5,000 fine. And then there's also 3 hours of laws and rules on that. They have another one here. Failure of an advertisement to state the usual fee when offers are free or discounted. That's another minimum $1,000 fine. I had no idea this was a thing. Using acupuncture without certification. I know you had to be certified. I didn't know there was a punishment just for that. That's a $3,000 fine. So I don't know how much you guys are charging for acupuncture, but if you're using acupuncture without a certification, that's a $3,000 fine, 1-year probation, letter of concern, and 3 hours of rules, laws, and ethics. They probably should add in there, just make you take the acupuncture course, right? But anyways, timely and appropriate, and just to go back to the acupuncture, right? If somebody's performing acupuncture in their office, they don't have the certification, right? And so they treat 12 patients with acupuncture. And each one of those is a violation. So they would automatically go, not just from a first offense. That's not, oh, we caught you for doing this, all this acupuncture. It's all the way to the third offense, which is third or more. And so for acupuncture, doing that, it's a minimum $10,000 fine, up to a maximum of a $10,000 fine and a revocation of your license, just for performing acupuncture, which obviously there's a certification for it, but I think that's a little bit harsh, but it is what it is. Timely and appropriately releasing medical records. When those annoying patients ask you for medical records, blah, 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 I need them. And you're like, oh, I'll get them to you. Okay. Minimum 3 hours of laws, rules, and ethics, continuing ed. Minimum $1,000 fine and a letter of concern. So if your patients are asking you for medical records, give it to them appropriately in an appropriate amount of time. Okay. And then improper usage of a laser device. That is, in addition to the passage of a training competency course for the device type, a minimum of $1,000 fine and 1-year probation. Okay. Failure to comply with the 30-day notification of convictions. If you get a conviction, if you plead no contest to a crime involving your practice, that is you have 30 days to notify your board. Always talk to a lawyer before you notify your board about anything, because a healthcare lawyer, okay, don't call your personal injury friend and say, hey, I had this happen, what should I do? They don't know jack, okay? But you have a 30-day requirement. That's Florida Statute 456.072, subsection 1, subsection X. $1,000 fine, letter of concern, and 3 hours of continuing ed. And then if you are in the PRN network, that's a network for providers that have addiction issues, struggle with addiction. If you test positive on a drug screening, they could suspend your license until your evaluation comes back with a recommendation of ability to practice. If the contract recommends entry into another contract and a minimum $1,000 fine, 1-year suspension, followed by probation and monitoring. Last two. One, if you're performing pelvic exams, this is super important. There's a Florida statute specific on getting consent from patients before you perform a pelvic exam. Obviously I'm a personal injury lawyer as well as I do PIP suits. I'm on a listserv, an email group of lawyers, and there was an email that I got as every lawyer in this group got, and it said, hey, there's a patient, client came into my office and said they got that where's my Logan Brown thumbers? Okay, the doctor went in and performed that technique on a young lady who did not have written consent. The woman claims she didn't give verbal consent. Okay, and so if you're going to perform any kind of adjustment or procedure or therapy to, those areas, make sure that you get it in writing. There's a law specifically just for pelvic exams, and that's it's only a written reprimand of up to $500, but also that's if you don't get the consent. I'm sure there's others for that. You know, the lawyers on that listserv were talking about, oh, I'll take that case. I want to sue that doctor because you have to have consent. And we do have these forms on our platform as well. So there is going to be all of these forms uploaded to the platform so you can have them and use them so that you don't have these violations ever happen. I know most of you don't perform pelvic exams, or most of you didn't go to Logan, but it's just, we're going to have them there. There's a consent for minors as well that you guys need to have. And so this one right here is failure to comply with parental consent. That's the consent form for minors. That's a $1,000 administrative fine, letter of concern, 6-month probation, and denial of licensure. So all of these are laws and rules. This document will be available on the platform for you, and you can view it if you'd like. And we're going to have, like I said, forms for the consent and other documents as well. So thank you for tuning in and watching this video. Thank you.